Today I want to go over the Janna reroll comp and talk about whether or not Janna is particularly broken on the current patch. She is one of the better performing comps and was really good last patch and is definitely one of the best performers this patch. So I want to break down the comp, talk about what makes it strong, what are some of the weaknesses of it, and also just go over the comp in general. Mostly on this channel I do guide style content. I've already done guides on how to play Mentor and how to play some of the other things that this Janna comp builds around, so I thought today I would just make a video strictly talking about this comp because it's something that kind of sipped through the cracks as the patches have changed. Additionally, if you want to see gameplay, you can check the description for my VOD channel. Yesterday I did a Malzahar reroll game for the current patch. But anyways, make sure to like and subscribe if you like my content. Now, let's go through Janna reroll. So Janna reroll is actually a culmination of two different things. The first thing that we're looking for is Janna, obviously, which can be a really powerful backline unit because she got a lot of buffs to the amount of damages she does over the last couple of patches. Additionally, there is a new power-up. I say new, but it's been around. It's just been more reliably able to hit right now, which is called Veteran. Right, with Veteran, you basically create a mentor unit out of one of these 4 units, and Janna is the one that you usually end up playing, where you get extra damage amp for your whole board, and then get additional attack damage and ability power. So basically what you end up doing is playing around Janna, but then also playing around the 4 mentor units in order to create a board that looks something like this. This is the final version of the board, and just to introduce it, you're basically going to be playing a reroll around Janna and Kabuko as your reroll units, because basically you're going to be relying on the 4 mentor core to make your board really strong, and then you're going to be including Janna, and just dropping one of the mentor units depending on who you hit. When you cap out your board, you're basically going to be playing around the Mentor core, which has been really popular throughout the entire set 15. But basically, you want to do that from a spot where you're rerolling for Kabuko 3 and Janna 3 on level 6, and then you push levels to fill in the other traits. When you play this board, a lot of times Mighty Mech gives you a cheap and an easy to throw in extra frontline unit, which works well with the board, and synergizes really well with the Mentor units. And then additionally, you play the Rise, so getting in the Executioner with the Mighty Mech works well, and playing Cassante, which is a really good Protector unit, also activates Protector because Janna is also Protector. Additionally, Janna is a Strategist, so the Mighty Mech and the Mentor Rise works really well to give her the Strategist synergy, which gives her an insane amount of damage amp. When you're building Janna, just as an introduction to the unit, typically you have to give her some sort of mana generation, so something like a blue buff is preferred because her attack speed isn't that high. Then she's going to have a lot of base stats, and she has a lot of damage amp from Strategist, and the base stats coming from her mentor bonus, right? Remember when we looked at Veteran? She's going to gain 30 attack damage and ability power when you're playing around 4 mentor, which then you want to have some way of scaling your ult in a nice way, so usually Jewel Gauntlet is the preferred item. Last item, you can just go for any other damage item. A lot of times it ends up being Giant Slayer because Giant Slayer is really good on the current patch. And it's a good use of components because you don't really have an outlet for those swords and bows with your other items that you're making. But if you want, you can also just make like a guard breaker, or sorry, a striker's flail is what it's called now, as your 3rd item. But typically the priority is blue buff and then Jewel Gauntlet. And of course there are different opportunities. You can even make a Nashers for mana gen if you're going full crit build. Some flexibility on the items, but usually something like this is going to perform really well. Kabuko, depending on what type of fruit you're aiming for, you would change the build of the Kabuko. Something that got recently nerfed but used to be really broken on him was best defense. It's hard to say how good it is on him because it's still early in the patch, but basically if you get shield, you convert that into bonus physical damage on your next attack. So with the Kabuko, you will typically build shield items on him if you're going best defense. So in the past, it was something along the lines of like double Sterix and a Protector's Vow, but you could also build the Kabuko with just general tank items and go for a more tank related power up because that will be really, really good. But anyways, we've introduced everything about this comp so far. Let's talk a little bit about what makes it strong, or why this comp is particularly strong right now. There's many things that are going for it that are really good. The first thing I want to talk about is mentor bonuses. So a thing about mentor is that it provides a team-wide bonus if you have just one mentor in. But if you have 4 mentor in, then all those bonuses only apply to the mentor units, and they get an upgraded ability. So we already talked about Janna. In Janna's case in particular, she's power-up dependent, where you would basically get the Veteran power-up. And your bonus with 4 mentor is that you get extra AD and AP, which is pretty good because it scales her really well. Because being a strategist, she has a lot of damage amp, so getting base stats is a really great way to give her an insane amount of damage or extra damage boost in those cases. The other mentor units are also extremely strong. And this is why Mentor has been really powerful throughout the entire set, because they basically have really powerful upgrades. So if there's any way to slot in a board that can make use of those powerful upgrades, usually the Mentor board becomes a lot more popular. With the upgrades, this is on a different website called Little Buddy Bot, but it just outlines very clearly what these upgraded abilities are. For Kabuko in particular, Kabuko goes from just having a shield and doing like a little bit of a stun to sending this line shockwave to the furthest enemy within 4 hexes, which means he has a really good shot of just like completely stunning your enemy carry or your enemy backline unit. So it makes it really obnoxious and really hard to deal with. Additionally, he also does an insane amount of damage because he scales well with the AD. So between the Kabuko hitting the backline and Janna, which we'll talk about in a second, having backline access, a lot of times this in conjunction with some of the other things can make this board really obnoxious. Additionally, we have Udyr. Udyr, it's reversed here, the part 1 and the part 2. The upgraded bonus is this passive where he summons a Firestorm that applies Burn and Wound. Burn and Wound is anti-heal. So if you're going against other boards, anti-heal is really important because if there's a tank or if there's a frontline unit or if there's melee carries, a lot of times they're healing up damage and that's how they can sustain themselves and be like really strong, impossible to break through tanks. By having it built into Udyr, you now make it easier to build items for this team. You don't have to waste components on making things like a Morello. You don't have to waste your time making, red buff. You don't have to waste your time making a Sunfire Cape. Instead, you can use those components to make other items. So it helps you in order to create 3 better tank items, because Sunfire isn't the best in terms of a tank item, it's more of a utility item, and you can make better damage items because these items also aren't particularly great damage items. Instead, they are more utility items. So instead, we can focus more on optimizing our damage items. Even if they're not the perfect items, we can still make good damage items, and even if they're not the perfect tank items, we can still make good tank items. Both of them work out really well. So that's a really efficient thing, and it's part of the reason why Mentor has been really popular, because just being able to forego making an item gives you a huge buff in just being able to better use your components within the comp. And then additionally, Rise recently got buffed in the previous patch as well to do more damage, but Rise also has a bonus effect when he gets his 4 Mentor bonus of doing like basically like extra splash damage. So instead of being purely single target, he will also hit like more enemies, which is really powerful, and also has a little bit of a healing effect, which helps sustain the board. If we look at this board as well, this board is also obnoxious in terms of the amount of stuns and disruptions that it has. Jarvan could easily sway a fight by jumping into the backline. We already talked about Kabuko. Kabuko usually will position him similar to an Akali, so that in the 4 hex range he's hitting the backline carry. Cassante has a de-aggro effect and it's kind of annoying, so a lot of times if you position Cassante on one of the far edges in front of an enemy carry, he'll die, revive, and waste a lot of the enemy carry's time, which is really powerful. And then of course we have the Kabuko stuns, in addition to like the Rise and the Janna doing damage. Overall, it's really obnoxious. One thing that also to note with Janna as well, Janna has a shielding effect where she grants a shield to the lowest health allies, in addition to doing damage that she hits AoE or hits multiple enemies. So Janna herself also helps to sustain this board, because as we're doing all these stuns, as we're doing all this disruption, we also have Janna that's keeping our board alive. So all in all together, it kind of repeats the same thing that we've already seen a lot of the time with the 4 Mentor board. This is a board where we used to play Rise carry. Then before Rise carry, we used to play Yone carry when Yone was broken on patch release with Gwen. Then we played this board with like other units. Now it just happens that the iteration is a reroll iteration where we're playing with Janna. So a lot of the stuff that I talked about, even in previous guides that I made on my channel, I have a how to play Mentor guide. A lot of the stuff that I explained in that guide goes very similar. We even have a similar discussion of is Mentor Rise broken as a previous video, which was like around a month ago when that comp was the dominant comp that most of the lobby was playing. But mind you, back then there was a power of fruit that made that comp particularly broken. So those are the first things. Those are all pluses for Janna of why it's really good. The other thing that makes Janna really good, this is a part that I think a lot of people don't optimize around, but it really makes a difference in a lot of fights, is Janna's ability herself, right? If you read her ability, grant shield to the 2 lowest percent health allies, but then she also shoots 4 butterflies, dealing magic damage split between the 2 closest enemies. Now the 2 closest enemies could often end up being a backline unit or can snipe random units as well. For that reason, because it's split between 2 closest enemies, sometimes positioning Janna on the same side as an enemy carry could often win you a fight. Additionally, it makes it so that in very late game scenarios, or sorry, not late game, but in very like end of fight scenarios, like deep into a fight, she actually has a really easy time sniping out the enemy carry. For example, let's say we're going up against, I'm trying to think of another stall comp. I think like a comp that often does really poorly into a Janna reroll is actually like a Kog'Maw comp, right? Because like a lot of times with Kog'Maw is trying to ramp up infinitely, right? If we have Kog'Maw in our back line here, I'll just move everybody a little bit closer so we can see everything. What ends up happening is, if we're here and this Swain is unkillable, that's fine, because Janna has access to the backline, being able to hit the backline enemies. So Kog'Maw as well has a similar effect where he applies his damage to multiple targets, right? 2 closest enemies. But the idea is that Janna a lot of times just bursts down or deletes units ahead of time. And if there's a situation where the front line is kind of split or some of the units don't die, she can even snipe a backline unit ahead of time by just doing that damage. In conjunction with the Kabuko that does the stunning of the backline, it makes it very disruptive because you're stunning the enemy carry, doing damage with the Kabuko, and then all of a sudden Janna can just like snipe a unit if she's positioned in such a way where she's closer to a backline unit than the other frontline units, or if your opponent runs out of frontline units. If that wasn't enough to what this comp also has in terms of utility and ability to like play around it, there's also the fact that Janna has Protector synergy, right? So as she's shielding everybody, if you don't know, Protector, this is something that I like to spread a little bit just because I think it's a little bit skipped upon. The Protector shielding bonus of durability applies whether or not Protector is on the unit. So any shields you apply to any unit on the board will apply 5% durability. So that means that with Protective active, every time Janna shields an enemy, she's also giving, every time she shields an ally, she's also giving them 5% durability. And that includes herself with her Protector bonus, which she will proc if she ever drops low on HP. So if she drops low on HP, she will then shield herself for her maximum HP, which is often quite a bit because she's usually rerolled to 3-star. So we also have a protection effect that applies to the whole board and a protection effect that applies to herself, which often makes her less susceptible to getting absolutely railed by other units trying to snipe the backline or hit backline units. So all in all, really good comp, lots of positive, lots of great things. Now what besides this, you can say a lot of things about a lot of comps in the current patch and talk about how good they are and how they function and why they function particularly well. Janna in particular also has the benefit of being one of the easiest to stabilize comps. The reason it's so easy to stabilize is because you can hit 4 Mentor a lot earlier. One of the big issues with Mentor in the past was the fact that 4 Mentor was very hard to hit. So if you don't have 4 Mentor, you don't have anything activated. There used to be a 4 Mentor Senna reroll comp that you played Senna as the reroll unit instead of Janna. And basically you have the same board as this, except instead of Janna, you would have items on Senna, and that was the comp. And that comp was really hard to play, because if you don't find a Rise, which you sometimes don't, he's a very contested unit because of his bonuses. You often find him on random boards like Sorks or other boards that need Strategists or other boards that need Executioner. He's always like on a board. So it's very hard to hit a Rise early. So before, if you have 3 Mentor, Mentor is all or nothing. Either you get bonuses for 1 Mentor or you get bonuses for 4 Mentor. So it made it very difficult to stabilize at lower levels or at like lower intervals of rolling, because if you don't hit the Rise, you were just screwed. You had no hope. It was bad. Your board was significantly weaker because you were losing a lot of the bonus effects. You weren't even getting upgrade ability, nor were you getting any bonuses, so all the units were just in a worse spot. But the thing that makes Janna particularly great, once again another positive, is that Janna being a Mentor unit means that in order to hit 4 Mentor to stabilize, you can swap in Yasuo for the Rise, which actually makes it very easy. You're basically guaranteed to see 1 copy of these units. If you're going for 3-star, rolling on low level, you're gonna hit the units, right? A lot of times on level 6, your board looks something like this, and then you have like a +1 unit that you just play for fun. Usually it's a Protector or something. You can very easily hit the 4 Mentor threshold and be fine rolling on level 6. So because you get the 4 Mentor bonus, now even a 2-star Janna and a 2-star Kabuko get the abilities of the massive stuns. You get the ability of the massive burst in AP. All of a sudden you're extremely stable and extremely strong from your mid game or even your early game. You can have a board that looks like this on stage 2. You know, this could be a stage 2 board. It's not completely absurd. Obviously there's 3 costs involved, but if you're rolling for units, or if you're rolling on stage 3, rolling on level 6 for the 3 stars, you're very easily going to hit these 2 units. And then eventually the issue is that you eventually want the Rise, because the Rise is going to be better for the synergies, but it's something you could just work around or something you could just play for a while. Now, what are the cons, what are the problems with this comp? Now, obviously, when you reach this board, the comp is extremely strong, and it places extremely high. Excuse me, I pressed the spacebar on my keyboard. But the problem with this comp isn't necessarily that this board is like broken or anything like that. It's that the board obviously is going to be strong, because if you look at this board, you're playing a lot of 4 costs. A lot of 4 costs while playing a reroll line. Usually this is a death sentence, right? Whenever a comp really wants to have certain 4 costs, but it's a low level reroll line, it usually forces you to have to be in a really good spot to play the comp. Because what ends up happening is, you can hit 3-star Janna, you can hit 3-star Kabuko, but if you're stuck on level 6 and you never see a Rise, never see a Jarvan, never see a Cassante, which all of these units are very hotly contested, your max cap for this board is going to be relatively weaker than many other boards that you would end up playing. So that means that you're basically like, you know, kind of like trying to play a 4 cost line while also playing a reroll line, which is a little bit weird, a little bit awkward. Now in the max cap, when this comp performs extremely well, it's usually on the backbone of having a Rise 2 that also is itemized. Because Rise 2 with the 4 mentor bonus is going to do an insane amount of damage. And a lot of times you end up building with AP because he has Executioner for crit and Strategist for damage amp. Right? So usually when you get to this point where you have like, you know, a Jarvan with items, now the Jarvan's actually doing stuff. When you have a Rise with lots of items, now the Rise actually is doing stuff. This is where the comp is like absolutely absurd, and it feels like Exodia, and it's suffocating, and it just beats everything, and it's like, what the fuck, this comp is broken. But a lot of it has to do with just being in a good spot for Janna and Kabuko. Because if you're not able to reach Rise 2, you're not able to reach Jarvan 2, this comp can really fall flat. Now, you're still likely going to go top 4. That's the part of it that makes it feel really broken. Because like I said, you're super stable at low level, right? You're not going to lose a lot of rounds on stage 3. You're not going to lose a lot of rounds early stage 4 because you already have the 4 mentor in. So like half the puzzle is already there. It's just the capping out the board in order to get those high placements is going to be weird. Just because of the discrepancy in the unit cost, right? You're going for, like, this comp is primarily composed of 2 costs and 4 costs. So there's like a little bit of a gap in terms of when you're likely to hit your 4 costs and when you're likely to hit your 2 costs. Obviously, you can hit the 4 costs on level 6 as well because you're rolling a lot of gold, but it's not that likely, and sometimes you can fall into a bad spot. So what would be the recommendations for playing this comp? Obviously, this comp is one, I'm not trying to dissuade anybody and say this comp isn't broken in the game. If there should be at least one Janna player in every single lobby on the current patch, in my opinion, because it's one of the better comps. One of the biggest problems it had last patch was that Mentor, the veteran, the fruit for Janna, was very hit or miss. That's kind of what kept it in check last patch, in my opinion, is that if you had a Janna, veteran was her least likely fruit. This is last patch, right? We had a patch yesterday. But in the previous patch, this was the least likely fruit on the Janna. So it was very ridiculous because, like, if you had a Janna in a good spot for a Janna, you just might not hit veteran, and then the comp just doesn't function properly. So a lot of times you were gated by not only having a Janna, but also checking your fruit and seeing if you hit veteran or not. Because if you don't hit veteran, you're basically just rolling the dice to try and get the lowest odds fruit on her without being able to, like, buy sell her because she's your main reroll unit, which was really bad. On top of that, best defense was also the lowest fruit, likelihood fruit on the Kabuko. So the max cap for the board last patch was really awkward to hit unless you had a particularly good spot for it. That changed, right? That's why Janna right now is very, very popular, because no matter what, veteran now is one of her most likely fruits. It got moved to a primary fruit for her, which means that it is her most likely fruit to get hit to hit when you use the fruit power up on her. So that means now it's just open season. If you see a Janna, even if you miss veteran on the first time, you're probably going to hit on the second or third try. You're basically guaranteed veteran on the unit because it's a likely fruit now, which definitely changes the dynamic of when you can play the unit. However, this comp, like I said, you want to hit it with enough gold to be able to find the 4 costs, because the 4 costs really tie it together. If you can reach a point where you have an itemized Rise 2, this comp is going to be one of the best in the game that is going to very easily just shred. You're just going to win against most players. You're going to win against most fights. It's going to do amazingly. However, if you don't reach the, if you don't even hit a Rise, right? If you're like dead before you hit the Rise, which is very unlikely, but if that happens, you're in a really bad spot. And obviously, if you're unable to upgrade these units, the board is going to lose to a lot of the other reroll comps, a lot of the other tanky comps, because the Janna needs time, and the Janna needs like the extra utility and stuns and distractions that the other 4-cost front lines provide, as well as the bonuses that Rise provides. Rise giving mana generation is really important to making this Janna cast a bunch and do a lot of extra damage. So with this comp, what I would normally say is that you want to be in a spot where you're really strong, right? You want to have an early Janna, you want to have lots of good items for her, you want to also be able to very easily hit Kabuko and Janna, such that you can just level easily and then hit the Rise and the Jarvan and the Cassante. Now the comp right now on current patch, assuming there's no B patch coming in like a day or two, is very strong, because the thing is, the stability that you get makes it so that you can usually force towards it. What I mean by that is, like, if you have a Janna, like not a good Janna spot, you have like a singular Janna and some like, you know, kinda okay items for Janna, you can probably just rock the comp. The comp's also really good with item economy, because Kabuko loves swords, like Sterix is good on Kabuko, so like AP items can very easily make Janna items. AD items like sword, if you're stuck with them, could make good Kabuko items. So there's actually like a decent spread on how you can use the different components to make like good items for the comp. But in general, it's usually the stability that makes it good, right? Because you're not going to lose a fight. If you have a Janna 2 and a Kabuko 2, you're probably going to win out most of the rounds on stage 3-4, which is going to give you a good spot for placements. Even if things go wrong, you'll probably still get like at worst a 6th or a 5th. Like if everything goes abysmally wrong, because you're just going to have such an HP lead on the lobby, you're probably not going to end up 8th. That's what makes this comp extremely powerful, and what makes it very enticing to play. Because like compared to a lot of other comps, like let's say you're trying to play Yuumi, for example. If you're trying to play Yuumi and you miss on the Yuumi, you're actually just 8th. Like you don't have a carry, you're just done. Here you're rolling at a low level and you're super stable because these units are fucking strong if you put 4 Mentor in. So you have a really good spot from a mid game perspective that gives you an HP advantage. But I wouldn't call the comp broken. Whenever I look at a comp and I have to say whether or not it's like absolutely broken, I usually look at it as how many players in a lobby can play it. Last patch, for example, Star Guardian with the specific power-up fruits was really ridiculous, because if you watch, like, if you go back and look up the tournament that happened last weekend and watch the final lobby of it, like literally everybody was playing Jinx, because this comp was actually broken, where a 1-star copy of the unit was super stable, so people would just play like a 4 or 5-way Star Guardian contest and just take the lottery option, because it was just positive EVs most of the time. And that made it all the way up to the highest level of gameplay. So you can imagine if you're in a lower level of gameplay where there's not as many Star Guardian players, then you would just get a free win if you had a Jinx, or if you angle towards a Jinx. It was broken, right? That's broken. Now, the Janna comp, you have to hit, and you also have to reach the cap of the 4 costs. So you can't really contest anybody. This comp isn't going to be super strong or stable with the Janna 2-star, for example. And when you're playing a reroll line, you want to make sure that you're uncontested, because if you don't hit early enough, you won't be able to make it to those points, right? If you are at a point where you're stuck on level 6 and you're not hitting those high cap units, you're not getting Mentor in, you're not getting Mech in, you're not getting Mech in, you're not getting Strategist in, you're not getting these things to cap out your board in actuality, then you're not going to be able to play it. So usually, the Janna reroll line only allows for one person to play it. And that's okay. It's okay if there's one comp that's really, really strong, if only one person can play it. And this comp also, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily win out all the time. It has an insane placement. Don't get me wrong, right? If you look at the stats, I'm sure it's going to be the top performing comp. Yeah, easily. It has a 4.05, right? It's basically broken, right? But if you look at the play rate, there's not a lot of contesters. You can basically only play with one person. It has a good win percentage, has an insane top 4 percentage. That's true. The win percentage is really high. It is really good, but it's not like crazy. Like I said, it's still really, really strong. But the thing is, only one person can play it. That's the main thing about it. You can maybe squeeze out 2 people in some lobbies if it's like high econ, but I'm skipping the wrong slides. But really only one person can play it. So at that point, you just have to ask yourself who has the best Janna spot, and try and see if you can be the one that has the good Janna spot, which is usually dictated by somebody having early Kabuko or early Janna, slam items, and they just call Janna, and then you just have to, like, understand that that's the one line. So, I think in some perspectives you can look at it and say it's ridiculous. Other perspectives you can look at it and say, because it's only allowed by one person, it's not the craziest shit we've ever seen. It's not the most toxic thing we've ever seen. And it also has beatable scenarios, right? A lot of times, like, you know, backline access, especially if the Janna isn't upgraded, could easily beat this board. And obviously, if these units, which are all very, very hotly contested, don't get hit or don't get like bought, right? If it's too hard to hit these units as upgrades, the comp could fall off a little bit later. The thing is that if you are a Janna player, it often is very easy for you to top 4 because of your mid game, right? This is the part that I think is the most broken part of the comp, right? Is the stability you get in your mid game. If there was ever changes to the comp in the future, I wouldn't care as much about the max cap of the comp, because I think the max cap is like on par with some other max caps currently. Maybe that's a little bit of a hot take, but I think that specifically stability in the mid game that gives you the HP advantage is what makes this crazy. Because of all the comps in the game, I think being able to be 4 mentor with these shitter units and do as much damage as you do, because Janna basically gets like 30 AP for free. She gets like half a Rabadon's for just like playing these units just for free on top of her kit that she already has as like a bonus. It's like, that's the part that's crazy, not the necessarily the late game or the later part. So anyways, how do you counter the comp, or how do you go against this comp? A lot of other rerolls, if you are stronger, usually can do well. A lot of it is dodging Kabuko, right? You don't want to be in the Kabuko ranges. It's very similar to Akali, right? Kabuko stuns with the same logic that, not the same logic, but a similar logic that Akali stuns, right? It's the 4 hexes away type of scenario. You also want to dodge the Janna, such that like if you have other backline units, you want to make sure that the Janna is never closest to your enemy carry. So often you're trying to be opposite side of the Kabuko and opposite side of the Janna. And often the Janna Kabuko players are trying to align these units together such that their Kabuko stuns and the Janna also can hit the backline potentially. That being said, it is possible to beat it. It's not necessarily broken. The Janna is really tanky. She's hard to chew through, so she's hard to scam. And a lot of it can come down to positioning. I think that this comp, obviously when you have more frontline, less backline, one of the killers of these comps is Akali, right? I think Akali could very easily beat a Janna player that's sleeping and not paying attention, because Akali gets on your Janna one time and you're in a good spot. If you're a Janna player and you want to know how to not get railed by Akali, I made a guide about different Akali positionings, where I introduce the comp and then I explain how you can dodge Akali in different ways. You can check out that guide as well. I think it's a really well put together summary of different ways to position your board to avoid Akali. But either way, it's not crazy. So I would say, you know, on a 1 to 10 of how broken it is, I would say this is like, you know, an 8 or a 9, right? It's not a 10, but that's just a my opinion thing. One last thing I want to cover about the Janna comp, if we're talking about optimizations and things you can do, another thing that's really great with the Janna line is specifically playing Crystal Gambit. So I kind of flashed this, I spoiled it a little bit earlier, but Janna opener a lot of times can lean very nicely into a Crystal Gambit opener. If you have a Crystal Gambit opener, I'm not saying you have to completely lose streak, but you get an insane amount of stability from playing 4 mentor, so you're gonna be fine once you get your Crystal Gambit cash out. So a lot of people, what they'll do is they'll sack their early rounds, try and get like a mid to high Crystal Gambit cash out, and then pivot into the line because it has so much stability, and so long as you hit everything, you're in a good spot. A lot of times with Crystal Gambit, there's often going to be a cash out that's pretty good, but it's just like, it's not the crazy cash out, it's like an in-between cash out. One of the really good ones is 170 gem power, right? All of these are great. You either get components, which you love components, if you can itemize Janna, Kabuko, and Rise, as well as have other tank items. More components for this comp, the better. It all works out nicely. Additionally, you can get the duplicators. Obviously, that's going to help out your hitting of your units, but then you also get Frying Pan and Spatula. Frying Pan and Spatula also work really well with this comp, right? If you look at the comp in particular, Janna is a strategist, and you're also playing Executioner on the board. So with a Frying Pan, you can make an Executioner emblem for Janna. I've seen some people do this. I don't think it's necessarily the greatest thing on her, but it is an option. But you can go Executioner emblem on Janna, make it so she gets crit, and then she also does extra bonus true damage, which is really powerful. So you can change your build around that. Or you can make a strategist emblem. This is a comp that works well with both the Frying Pan and the Spatula. And having more strategist in also buffs the Janna a lot, because she's getting a significant portion of damage amp even if the emblem is not directly on her. And strategist emblem is one of the best in the game, that it also has the bonus effects of giving extra armor or giving extra attack speed, whether you put in the front line or the back line. So when you're playing it, a lot of times like the really crazy Janna spots, utilize Crystal Gambit cash outs such as this one. Obviously, some of the later ones are also fine. Artifacts, there's many hits for it. You can put Mana Zane on Janna. You can put some stuff on Kabuko as well. Having the 4 cost or extra gold helps you to hit, right? If you can hit early and be able to push to level 8 and then roll on level 8 for your 4 cost, it's good. So more gold, the better. And obviously, like the spatula and the component anvils are also going to work out. So usually there's like a little sweet spot of like 170, 210. And you can often hit this with like, like mid-stage 3 if you start the game with Crystal Gambit. So basically, you'll just sack up until mid-stage 3. You'll have around like, 50 or 60 HP, depending on how you're playing your Crystal Gambit. Then you just completely win out from that point because 4 Mentor is going to be really stable. You hit your 3 stars, you push your levels, and then you're in a good spot because you're up so many resources. And if you get one of those better cash outs, you're going to be in an insanely good spot for that. But that's just another bonus fact about the Janna Mentor comp while we're making this a comprehensive guide. But anyways, hopefully this video was informative and helpful. Like I said, the main reason for doing this is mostly because I didn't do a Janna reroll style video. And it's something that, I want to make a separate video on, while also giving you like a lot of tips and stuff because it's something that wasn't particularly covered in some of the other videos that I talked about Mentor or Strategist or things like that. Thanks for watching. Have a great day and see ya. Bye-bye.